Something is not adding up anymore. The story being told is starting to crack, and the cracks are now impossible to ignore. What once sounded confident now feels uncertain, and what once looked controlled now appears fragile. This is where everything begins to shift. Donald Trump is facing a moment of pressure, but this pressure is not coming from allies, it is not even coming from domestic critics. It is coming from a rival that sees through him, and that changes the entire equation. Iran is no longer reacting cautiously, it is responding with calculated confidence. Its officials are no longer quiet or defensive. Instead, they are speaking openly and directly, and their message is becoming increasingly clear. They believe the United States is overstretched, they believe the strategy lacks consistency. And most importantly, they believe Trump is bluffing. This is where the situation becomes more complex. Iranian state media has started highlighting contradictions. They are pointing to repeated threats without follow-through. They are questioning the credibility of US leadership, and they are doing it in a very public way. At the same time, Trump is making bold claims. He describes Iran as weakened and collapsing. He suggests leadership structures are falling apart. He even implies internal chaos within the country. But those claims are not being confirmed elsewhere. Instead, Iran's leadership appears coordinated. Different branches are issuing unified statements. The judiciary, military, and religious leadership align. That unity sends a very specific signal outward. It suggests stability rather than collapse. Here is where things begin to diverge sharply. The narrative from Washington emphasizes dominance, but the narrative from Tehran emphasizes resilience, and observers are starting to notice the difference. Reports from major outlets raise further concerns. They point to extensive use of US military resources, missile systems and interceptors have been heavily deployed, precision weapons have been used at high rates. And those stockpiles are not easily replaced. This raises an important strategic question. What happens if another conflict emerges soon? Could the United States respond at full strength? Some analysts suggest that may not be possible. The situation is becoming more layered each day. Military commitments are stretching across multiple regions. Resources are being redirected from one theater to another, and allies are beginning to take notice. Equipment once positioned in Asia has shifted. Systems intended for European defense are reassigned. These movements reflect urgent priorities in the Middle East, but they also create vulnerabilities elsewhere. At the same time, Iran is observing closely. Its leadership is analyzing both actions and rhetoric. They are comparing statements with real-world outcomes, and they are adjusting their posture accordingly. This is where perception becomes critical, because perception can influence strategy and timing. If one side believes the other is weakening, it may act more boldly than before. Iranian media has even turned to mockery. They highlight moments where Trump appears fatigued. They reference long and unclear public statements. They question the consistency of his messaging. These reactions are not random or casual. They are part of a broader information strategy. They aim to shape global perception of leadership strength, and they appear to be gaining attention. Meanwhile, Trump continues to project confidence. He claims military success across multiple domains. He speaks of naval control and air superiority. He describes blockades as fully effective, but independent assessments paint a more mixed picture. Control of key waterways remains contested. Shipping routes continue to adapt and shift, and enforcement appears more limited than described. This raises another critical issue. If control is not absolute, then the strategic advantage becomes uncertain, and uncertainty introduces risk for all sides involved. Diplomacy adds another layer to this situation. Negotiations require consistency and credibility. They depend on trust, even between rivals. But conflicting messages complicate that process. Trump has indicated openness to a deal, yet his public statements remain highly aggressive. This creates a difficult environment for negotiations, because tone and substance must align. At the same time, deadlines continue to shift. Timelines are extended repeatedly without resolution. This pattern is becoming increasingly noticeable, and it raises important questions about strategy. Iran appears to recognize this pattern. Its officials refer to repeated delays and reversals. They interpret them as signs of hesitation, and that interpretation shapes their response. This is where the dynamic changes again, because once hesitation is perceived, leverage can shift unexpectedly. Economic consequences are also building. Energy markets are reacting to ongoing uncertainty. Shipping disruptions affect global supply chains, and recovery timelines remain unclear. Even if conditions stabilize quickly, infrastructure and logistics take time to restore. That delay can ripple through global markets, and it affects countries far beyond the region. Back in Washington, domestic pressure continues. Economic concerns remain a central issue for voters. Cost of living challenges are widely discussed, and public patience is not unlimited. At the same time, international relationships are evolving. Allies are reassessing their positions and commitments. Some are seeking more independent strategies. Others are watching carefully before making decisions. This creates a more fragmented global landscape, and in that environment, coordination becomes harder. Shared goals require stronger communication than ever before. Trump's approach to alliances has drawn attention. Statements about long-standing partnerships have shifted. Engagement with rival leaders raises further questions, and those moves are closely analyzed worldwide. This is not just about one conflict, it is about broader perceptions of leadership direction, and those perceptions influence global stability. Back on the ground, tensions remain unresolved. Ceasefires are announced but not fully sustained. Incidents continue despite formal agreements, and trust between parties remains limited. This creates a cycle of uncertainty. Each development raises new questions, and each delay adds to the complexity. Here is where things stand now. The United States projects strength publicly, Iran projects unity and endurance, and the gap between narratives continues to widen. Observers are left trying to interpret reality. Which claims reflect actual conditions? Which strategies are truly effective? And what happens next in this unfolding situation? One thing is becoming increasingly clear: this is no longer a simple confrontation. It is a layered conflict of perception and power, and as both sides adjust their approach, the outcome becomes harder to predict. This raises important questions moving forward. Will diplomacy gain momentum in the coming weeks? Or will tensions escalate further without resolution? The answers are not yet visible, but the direction of events will matter greatly. For now, the situation remains fluid, and every statement carries weight. Subscribe to Real Mind Network, like, comment, and share.